On the Tape is presented by CME Group, where risk meets opportunity, and iConnections, reimagining how the investment industry connects. This is a special podcast, and I've been waiting for this for a while. Because
hang on. When we said that about you, you were like, you're so full of shit. Don't blah,
I
blah,
never
blah.
did. I didn't say that.
But kind of did. I listened to it.
Well, I kind of did.
Yeah.
But I hope they were sincere.
We were.
But I am being sincere now. No, I know you were. And I had the best time with you ladies. By the way, it's Jen Saarbach, it's Kristen Kelly, and they're from the Wall Street Skinny.
Woo-hoo.
I mean, they're taking the world by storm. If you follow them on the Instagram, it's amazing.
And the TikTok.
And the what?
And the TikTok.
And the TikTok.
Yeah.
But you know what? They're not just pretty faces. I mean, these are brilliant women, right? I mean, they're doing things that nobody else has attempted to do. Maybe they've attempted, but been unsuccessul. So Kristen and Jen, thanks for joining us.
Wow, that was the best intro ever. Also, since you called us pretty faces, which no one has ever attempted to do before either.
I mean, it's, as they say, if it's the truth, it's not flatter. I mean, it just happens.
Well, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So some of our listeners or viewers who they tune in for us, they want the market analysis, they want kind of a little bit of the banter, the way we kind of constructed our pod, the way we kind of grew up in the business on trading desks and having that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And you guys also grew up on trading desks, but you left it all behind. We've left it all behind too, but we're still talking markets and doing that. You guys are really leaning into financial literacy and education. So we want to get to all that, but we got to start with where they started.
Well, that's because
it's way before the business they started.
If you watch them or listen to them, they finish each other's sentences. I mean, they've clearly known each other, right? Your whole lives. So we'll start with Kristen. Speak to that. You guys are gals. You're sisters.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yes. I mean, we have been friends since we were 7. We grew up and, I mean, we're like the uncool kids in middle school. She ditched me and went to a different high school. We went to different colleges. We both ended up on Wall Street. Actually, I ended up there because of her.
Right.
But we've been, we stayed friends and then ultimately started this business together, and it's been the coolest thing because I basically just get to talk to her all day long and then make fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, how many people can say they knew you back when?
Right.
And so, were we to get an ego, it's impossible because you have someone to keep you in check.
Well, that's always a good, having people keep you. And when you're talking about people you've known since 2nd or 3rd grade, I mean, there's a history there that you can't really replicate in real life. So speak to the importance of the familiarity you two have and being able to sort of lean on each other, Jen, because sometimes you have to do those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think when we started this business, I was like, I want to hire paid actors. I do not want my name, my face, my likeness anywhere in public. This is very uncomfortable for me. And Kristen was like, who cares? No one cares anyways. No one's even ever going to. And I was like, well, that's true. We're probably just going to be screaming into the void for the better part of the next 18 months until something else shiny comes along. And it was really hard starting out because I had such a steep learning curve. Kristen is a born teacher. She was born to do this. It's extremely natural for her. For me, I felt like I had to be an actor. I'm going to play the role of a teacher. And it was really uncomfortable for me. And having, my best friend as my partner to give me the kind of criticism, but also encouragement that I needed. And then also to be, not the shoulder to cry on, we haven't had too many tears in this. But listen, when you are on the internet, it is rough.
Yes.
And I was on the trading floor for the better part of a decade. I have been called everything imaginable on a recorded line. Those things pale in comparison to what, random dude 123 on the internet is willing to say to you over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, so I'm going to say this. I think there's a lot of similarities between what Dan and I do and what you two do. No, but let me just explain. Jen and I are sort of kindred spirits because we're the sine curve, right? I mean, we're all over the effing place. And you two, Kristen and Dan, you're sort of, you flatline, so you allow us to sort of intersect you at points, but then arc both to the upside and to the downside. And I think, Kristen, it works for us. I mean, do you get that same sense?
Well, I mean, we literally were just talking about that earlier today. I do think that Jen is much more, she was a salesperson, right? She is that. And I studied engineering. I mean, again, I feel like you guys have a similar dynamic, but you also have such a great, just back and forth. You guys, the energy is, I think, what people really gravitate towards. And I think for us, one of the things in more of just the financial literacy, learning corporate finance or whatever the heck we're teaching, it can be so boring and dry. And so I think that having, again, this background with each other where we can like joke about things and like whatever, make fun of each other, but also like get into serious stuff, I think it just kind of makes the content a little more approachable. And so I think that that's maybe why it resonates with people. But it's the same way, again, with you guys. Like, you have this amazing dynamic, and that's why people tune into you versus like, random XY person who's maybe not as much fun to listen to.
I mean, like, this is a tough space though, right? Like, because it is niche-y for all intents and purposes, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think back, like, let's talk a little bit about Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley, because these were not easy places to grow up. Guy on the pods talks a lot, and he did on your pod. I actually learned, this was amazing actually, because that pod went over an hour, okay?
Yeah.
And Guy and I spend hours a day with each other, talking in these mics in front of, the camera on CNBC or whatever. And I learned things on that pod. I thought it was really fascinating
about him,
about his career at Goldman and Drexel and the like. And so you guys are really quickly approaching, especially with the Lehman Brothers. People, like, a lot of your listeners might not know what Lehman Brothers is.
Yes,
they might not, and I'm not calling you old.
It's fine.
You know what I mean?
I embrace
So
it.
talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what was it like? Were you guys still very much in touch when you were in Times Square? You guys were across Times Square from each other.
Well, we also lived across from each other, also living in Times Square. I was on 50th and 8th, and she was like 50th between 8th and 9th. And then we worked across. So no, I remember there was like this, I forget what the trade was. It was a Morgan Stanley 2007. Some trader lost like, I don't know,
$9 billion.
$9 billion. And I remember she calls me up. She's like, are you guys okay over there? And again, she's calling from like Lehman, has no idea what's about to happen in like the next 6 months. But yeah, I mean, we hung out all the time back then.
Yep. And I will say this too, like, one of the really cool things about having such a lifelong friendship is that we have kind of taken each other on whatever the journey is. So when I was a summer analyst at Morgan Stanley, Kristen came to visit me for whatever it was, July 4th weekend or something like that. And she was like, what is this place? Literally posted a photo on Facebook of Lehman Brothers, Leeman Brothers, because she'd never heard of it and didn't know how to spell the name. And so for many of our listeners who won't know what Lehman Brothers is, it's Lehman, just to be clear. And that's where I ended up starting my career. And I think, too, we were talking about this earlier, how the beginning of your career takes on such like an outsized importance mentally when you're thinking about it in terms of like those developmental things, just because it's so new. And all of those things, all of those new inputs really leave deep grooves in your mind. And so we had no idea that we were starting our careers during such a critical turning point in the markets and the business and everything. But I think whenever you're starting your career, it's going to have that same importance. Hopefully it doesn't take the entire global economy down with it. But I think that's just a natural thing.
So, Kristen, my sense is being on a trading desk for you was a huge wake-up call in terms of, what you studied in college and probably what you, I don't want to say exposed to, but, your sense of normalcy. You probably, and I'm pointing at Jen now, you probably loved every minute of it. Like, it was right up your alley. But for you, Chris, you probably this is sort of foreign to me. How long did it take to sort of acclimate yourself?
So to be clear, I was on the trading floor not for very long because I started in CDOs and then I ended up moving actually into global capital markets and converts, project finance, and then up to banking.
That world.
So it's funny. I love that. Like, when I was in college, like I said, I was an engineer. I was a dork, but like I actually would always need like TVs on to do problem sets and stuff. Like, I needed to be around friends, and like we'd be watching whatever it was, like Sex and the City or something, and I'd just be doing problem sets, and then like that's how. So I loved that idea.
The stimulation, the energy.
Yeah. So that's why I ultimately wanted fixed income, like sales and trading, because I thought that was like such a cool thing. Again, I in the inner dork in me, it's like investment banking made more sense, but I liked the whole trading floor environment. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know what anything was. I remember like someone was talking about EPS, and I'm like, what the heck is that? It's just, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I did not know any of that stuff, which again is why like we started the account that we did, because I want people who it might be the right fit for them to get a little bit of exposure if they didn't have parents that like could teach them all this stuff.
So let's talk about sort of the genesis of this, Jen. Why you decided that this was the right time. You obviously have the right partner in Kristen, but in terms of the right time and trying to establish yourselves and determine who your audience is and all those things that go into this.
Yeah, well, I actually think there's never a right time to start a business because it's always such a risky, terrifying thing. But I also make giant life decisions quite capriciously. So Kristen was exiting the business that she was in, and she was like, what am I going to do? I just had another baby, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I don't know, let's start another business. She was like, let's start another business. Seems like a good time. Absolutely terrible time. But what we've found is that more broadly speaking, I think that there is a perceived lack of opportunity, lack of hope, and lack of path for so many young people out there because they don't have the same kind of communities that you guys grew up in, that we grew up in, where you're surrounded by teachers, parents, all these people in your community who are giving you mentorship and guidance and direction. For better or worse, so many young people now feel like they're sitting alone in a room with a phone, and that's their only source of information. And so that information can be good, that information can be bad. We decided to meet people where they are and say, hey, listen, if you're going to be on social media, if you're going to be listening to podcasts, if you're going to be trying to get your information about the world that way, why not have us disseminate information that we wish we had had and had to glean from our friends, our mentors, our parents, et cetera, back in the day, and disseminate that information now in a world that is otherwise obfuscated by jargon, just holistically speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how did you guys decide at the teaching aspect of it? Because you guys do the Excel stuff. You do a lot of like 101. It's great. And in some ways, like I've forgotten a lot of this stuff. So I'm watching this stuff and you guys are entertaining and it's fun, you know what I mean, to kind of engage it. None of it's boring. I mean, really, I haven't really done the Excel stuff, but all the other stuff. So how did you decide to lean into that aspect of the business?
Well, that part's easy. I mean, like I have always loved teaching and ultimately went into a firm that was training people, like new hire analysts, who were starting at a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman or a whatever it was, a Blackstone, how to do the job. But again, it was all people who had already gotten the job. And I also remember when I was talking to Jen, and this is, by the way, right as the SVB crisis was happening. And I was teaching a class at Blackstone. This was one of the last classes I taught before I left. And a number of the kids were like, is this the Lehman, is this going to be the beginning of the great financial crisis? And Jen had always been coming to me and been like, we should start this business. Like, we should do a podcast, whatever. And I said, Jen, like, it would be really cool if we sat down and did a podcast about like your experience working at Lehman and like what it was like being on the trading floor as it went under. And she was like, yeah, okay. She's like, well, all right. Well, then to do that, we need to like actually go through like, what is an investment bank? And I have been teaching, again, that population for 13 years before we started this. So for me, like, this just seemed like, I don't know, like a super easy thing, but also like there's not many 101 podcasts out there. There's not a lot of 101, content on social media that's also fun to watch. And so we wanted to try to create that because, again, it's I think what we wish we had as we were starting in the industry. And I mean, so again, that was why for both of us, it just kind of made sense because it just didn't seem like there was anybody else doing that.
What was the measure of success? Like, what did you actually start
Any
a
day
business? No. But like, what did you have in mind? Like a lot of folks like turn on the mics and they do it from home and they're just really trying to get like their self out in the world.
Yeah.
And again, you could actually set out and set goals that have nothing to do with like monetizing it, or did you guys want to create a business?
Yes.
I think here was one of the things, right? I think so many people create a widget and then use a podcast, use social media to sell that widget. We had nothing to sell. We just wanted to build a community and ask them ultimately what kind of content and what kind of products they want us to deliver. So now we're building a self-paced course and things like that, and ultimately looking for different ways to serve that audience. But at the end of the day, the first measures of success that we had, I mean, it would be, guys, we would get like a one-line email from someone who'd be like, I'm a first-year analyst at UBS, and I understand my job better having listened to you guys, right? And that was life-changing when we get an email like that. Or, someone would say, I never understood what my partner did until, and when we started realizing that we were having that impact on people, Kristen would get comments on her TikTok video. I learned more in 30 seconds from you on TikTok than I did in a 2-year MBA.
Yeah.
Right. So it was that initial feedback that was our and that has been really our entire measure of success thus far.
Well, it's validation is what it is. And that's really what you need to sort of, because you always question yourself.
Yeah.
When you get that validation, you're like, at least I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Chris. I'm coming to you next, so get ready.
Okay.
Jen.
Yeah.
Authenticity is essential. People ask, and I'm not suggesting I'm any good on television, but people say, what does it take to be on? I'm like, just be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. I probably use that line on your show.
I don't know.
But it's really important. But as a woman specifically, but in general, being yourself and being funny and being playful and being all those things, a lot of times people then mistake that for maybe they're not that bright. Quite frankly, nothing could be farther from the truth with you two. You're both extremely bright. But how do you sort of balance that? Because it's a little bit tricky, Jen.
Well, I think here's the thing. Back in English 101 or whatever, when you're in fourth grade and they're teaching you how to write a paper, people say, show me, don't tell me. Yeah. Right. And we always thought, hey, listen, a lot of people like to throw their credentials around.
Right.
We don't have that many credentials. I don't have 10 different initials after my name. I don't have advanced degrees. I don't have billions of dollars of capital and assets under management. Right. All I have is kind of my brains and my wit and my moxie. Right. And my sense of humor. And so if I can communicate information in a valuable way, and that stands on its own as a product, then let people judge me on that criteria. And so I think, if anything, authenticity is so much more important than other credentials in that way. And being honest and vulnerable is, and admitting when we don't know the answers. The best part of this job that we're doing is every day we get to say, I don't know, or, hey, can I ask a stupid question? Because so many people are afraid to look stupid. We embrace looking stupid. I'm running on, down my hallway on the internet all day long looking like a fool.
I will say, just to follow up on that, I think part of the reason too is because we know our stuff.
Right.
And come for us. We'll act silly in that because we know our stuff. And if we didn't, I think then that's I think what gives us an advantage is we're turning 40 this year.
Mm-hmm.
We have,
thank
you. We do know what we're talking about. And a lot of the people who are on social media doing the same thing are, maybe they had an internship at Goldman Sachs. And so, so they do have to be more serious because they want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
We're the opposite. We're we don't need to be taken seriously because we stand behind what we know and how we explain it. And again, if people do, they say mean stuff, whatever, you guys are so dumb all the time. And it's well, cool. You can,
Well, yeah. When somebody writes a comment about my appearance on the internet, I'm like, fine, whatever. When they're like, you're wrong, I'm like, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's right.
Flames darting out of my eyes.
But, you use the word, Jen, vulnerability, Kristen. So talk about, because that's a hard, it's hard to get across that sort of chasm, right? Knowing, I can be safe here and do my thing, or I can put myself out there, be vulnerable, take sort of the arrows that are, inevitably going to come. That's something you sort of have to really think about.
It's a lot easier because we have each other. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, look, if it wasn't the two of us, I think both of us would be in a puddle on the ground somewhere.
Right.
But because it's someone says something nasty to either of us or whatever it is, it's easy to go and be well, I can go attack, not that I'm going to go attack someone, but I can block and delete someone, or I can go and defend Jen, vice versa. So we have each other to lean on. And I think that has been so helpful. I don't know. I think that's the biggest thing. I will also say, I think that Jen she's better at it than I am. She is. She's very, she will put herself out there, and I'm still trying to get there for certain things. I disagree. You do a great job of that.
It's, it's interesting. It's not an intuitive medium. It's difficult. And I think there's a skill set. I think in some ways, and take this the right way, because as I said earlier, we're similar. There's almost like a chip missing or some sort of character flaw that we probably both have, because there's a level of not giving a shit and just sort of saying what's on your mind.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think also, though, when you think about social media and podcasts, this was technology and a media that was developed kind of after our time, after our brains were fully formed. So our brains weren't really wired that way to be oh, I need to find a video where people are, lip syncing this trend and now fit it to my niche or whatever. But once you realize it's all just iterative variations on the same theme, that it's just, how can you communicate with people? How can you send a message? How can you teach something and make it fun and funny and relatable to people? It's all the same shit.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this. So guys started in the business in the late 80s. I started in the late 90s. You guys started in the late aughts, it sounds like. Does that sound right? Yeah, okay, mid to late aughts. And it's interesting. When guys started and when I started, if you wanted to make money in America, and you came from the right places, okay, and that was a big part of it, you went to Wall Street. It was that simple. There weren't too many other options. Now it seems like there's a brain drain from Silicon Valley. There's a whole host of other things. Yeah. What do you tell people? Because I don't tell young, I have two college age daughters, I don't tell them that this is the place for you? Now, they don't have the same focus on kind of making it, you know what I mean, in this business.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people? Like, are you pretty satisfied with the careers that you had on Wall Street? And do you think it was a good use of your time?
Somebody on one of our social media comments said, I absolutely hated my old job and I miss it so much. And I was like, never has the Wall Street zeitgeist been summed up so succinctly. Like, I didn't love my time on Wall Street, but what it did is it opened doors for me. And whether you do a summer internship on Wall Street, whether you do a 2-year stint, or whether you do a decade-long career or more, educating yourself, being around really smart people, being around the transactions that make the world turn, there's nothing bad that can come from that in terms of preserving future optionality for yourself. So what I say is, look, maybe you have no interest in finance. Maybe it's what you always wanted to pursue. But by at least trying it on for size, seeing if it interests you in some capacity, all you're going to do is open more doors for yourself. And we present it as simply an option that most people don't understand or know about. And by the way, the options on Wall Street are so different than they were when we were all coming up.
But you know what's interesting about that, and I want to definitely get your opinion, Kristen, is like, some people get really pigeonholed. I know people who have overstayed their welcome on Wall Street, and they kind of peak, and then they're like, what am I going to do next? And they didn't, a guy always talks, I think he said it on your pod, life's a game of Frogger. Yeah. You got to know when to jump to the next log. I'm curious, did you feel the same way? Because you obviously,
I jumped very early.
You pivoted.
Well, look, and the reason I wanted to go into it in the first place, like, I was studying engineering. Again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started biomedical. I did a stint in a research lab. I was like, well, this sucks. Like, there's dead bodies. That's creepy. So then I did like mechanical, and I can barely turn on a TV. I was like, that's not going to work. And then when I saw Jen doing what she did, I was like, oh my God, you're getting paid to learn. Like, it's essentially, I looked at it as a 2-year MBA where you're getting paid for it. So for me, I looked at it as, I'm using this as an opportunity to learn. And I've always, like I said, I've had a teaching bug my whole life. I've loved teaching. My mom was a teacher. It made sense for me. So I kind of leaped pretty soon. Yeah. I do think, actually, I stayed in my career where I was teaching too long, and I didn't start this business early enough. Like, in hindsight, I wish we had done this, a decade ago, or, maybe whatever. It doesn't matter. But, like, I wish I had done this earlier. So I do think that for a lot of people, if you do decide to work on Wall Street, we look at it as an opportunity to learn a lot of stuff around really smart people, develop a great network, get a really strong brand on your resume, and then use it to do whatever the heck else you want to do. Like, to me, that's a great option. But I think with anything, if you get stuck in a career or stuck in something and you can't leave, like, that's where it's not a great thing.
When we started Fast Money, we used to have to ask CEOs to come on the show. And then it all shifted in 08 and 09 when people started asking us. You're probably seeing similar in terms of, the early days, who's going to come on? You're laughing because...
We have a story.
But now I'm sure you're getting incoming calls like, I want to be on with you chicks. Talk about that.
One of the things that's been so incredible is we've seen the shift from us having to beg and plead people to come on the podcast to now us having audiences with thought leaders in the industry we never... again, and you guys, right? Like,
I'm here, which is why you're saying it.
Well, by the way, Ron Biscardi, a great friend and partner of ours from iConnections, he pinged us, and we chat with Ron maybe every other week or something like that. He pinged us and is like, "Do you guys know Wall Street Skinny?" And we're like, we do not. Okay. Like, I had no idea. We're not good on social. We don't, and they sent us some of this stuff, and we were both like floored. We were like, this is so good. Now, some of it's not our speed. Like, I have no idea what these mean, like the TikTok stuff and everything like that. No, but the other stuff, it really did resonate. And I think we were on the phone within a day, right? The four of us. Yeah. And then we were trying to figure out, because listen, I go back to my last question is like, when I have young kids come to me, like college age kids, and they're trying to figure out what to do, I am no longer saying like go to Wall Street. You know what I mean? Like, and not for. I just don't think it's that creative place to be. I don't think the longevity for a lot of folks. I don't think a lot of the skills are that transferable anymore to. You know what I mean? Like, so to me, I think there's this place called Silicon Valley where it's every industry is there. It could be finance. It could be housing. It could be consumer products. The list goes on. And I think entrepreneurship is trumping a narrow path to finance, except for one thing, the 2-year program that you guys both went. Jump after that, I guess. You know what I mean? Does that make some sense? Or
I think that's totally fair. However, with all things, in order to understand why the cover of a song is so great, you have to hear the original, right? In order to understand how a derivative works, you need to understand that an interest rate swap is a synthetic bond funded at SOFR. And in order to understand how to become an entrepreneur, how to work in fintech servicing the finance industry, you need to understand the core tenets of that industry in order to be an innovator, in order to service your clients well, and in order to really make an impact. And I think that so many people think that they can just completely bypass that learning process that happens. And I think we're seeing that with the rise of AI. People are like, oh, just give me the thing that's going to spit out the answer. Why do I have to sit here and read this 250-page document and fumble around with it? Well, because guess what? The answer that you're going to get is not your answer. It's an answer that was chosen for you. I want to choose my answer. And if it's the wrong answer, I'm the one who has to sleep with that at night.
Think about this, Kristen. I'm going to you, Jen. What's the best cover of a song in your opinion? You're qualified to answer this because you can think on your feet as well as I can.
Okay. I really like, and I don't remember the band name that covered it, but the cover of Wild Horses.
The Rolling Stones, Wild Horses?
The Rolling Stones, Wild Horses. But who does the cover? I can't
Dan
remember.
It's probably like the Foo Fighters or one of those.
Fighters.
Pearl Jam.
Are you going to come to me for a second?
No, I'm gonna tell you. I love Linda Ronstadt's cover of Tumbling Dice by the Rolling Stones. But I will tell you, Metallica's cover of Turn the Page, Bob Seger's Turn the Page, circa 1996, is fantastic.
I enjoy Pearl Jam's cover of Baba O'Reilly that they play every other night in their encore, and it's pretty epic. Guy, you would even enjoy that because you're a huge Who fan.
Kristen, you want to jump in here, or is this out of your ballywick?
Yeah, this probably. I mean, there's probably some, but I can't even. I've been on a purely Taylor Swift diet. I have 3 girls, 6, 4, and 2.
Whoa. 3 girls.
3 girls, 6, 4, and 2. I basically just listen to Taylor Swift.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
I'm been listening to Tortured Poets. So that came out on April 19th. That's her latest. That's her latest album. As did Pearl Jam's new Dark Matter.
Yeah, you've been posting a lot of Pearl Jam lately.
I'm going tomorrow morning. I'm going to see him in LA 2 nights in a row.
Good.
Long Black Veil cover by Dave Matthews of Johnny Cash, and this is
Dave Matthews.
So I do this once a day with him. I say I'm going to do something to get
Dave
you
Matthews
tweaked,
sucks.
and this is what
Dave Matthews doesn't like Dave Matthews.
Dave Matthews was my very first concert in 1998 in Boston.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because I wasn't allowed to go to a concert until 1998.
Wait a second. Really?
You were 14.
Yeah, I was 14. Yeah.
That's okay.
It's a good age.
Yeah.
No, I think so. Not that anybody cares, and we'll get back to the topic at hand.
Sure.
My first concert was in August of 1976, Boston. They just released their first album. They played their album. It was an hour and a half at
Considered
best.
one of the best rock albums ever.
It is one of the top 5 rock albums of all time.
All right, mine was Beach Boys in 1980 at the Garden State Arts Center.
Look at you.
What about you?
I don't even know. I think it probably was with her. Like,
what did I drag you to? I've dragged you to.
I've gone with her to Lady Gaga, Britney.
Yeah.
It's Britney, bitch.
Oh, that was my favorite concert of all time.
Of course it was.
Even though
we'll get back on top.
Yeah.
So now you ladies have created something without question. So the trajectory is going to move very quickly now, is my sense. So Kristen, well, let's talk about that. Like, you write down sort of wish list things. Like, what's on your list? I hate the year from now shit, but a year from now, what do you envision?
Well, we really want to have our course, which, like, I mean, at this rate, it's going to be a year before it's out, but like
it's coming out in September.
So, I mean, that's obviously part of it. I'm ultimately, I guess, Jen, do you? I mean, how much do we want to do?
No, I mean, listen,
we have like some pie in the sky.
Well, then no, but like, you have to have goals.
Vision? Yeah, so we have different tiers of like, this is the near term, this is longer term, and then this is like, ultimately our vision.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the thing. We can only like ride the wave as it goes, but I think all of the things that have developed from our business organically have solved problems, right? Whether it be, I'm bored learning about finance. Okay, fixed. And we've, hopefully. But I think kind of the next big challenge that exists more structurally is that we get you on our podcast, right? And at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, you talk about the qualities that make, someone great coming up into this business or any business, right? And you talk about characteristics like grit, resilience, right? Having a fire, right? Like all these things, okay? And every single thought leader in the industry that we talk to says the exact same thing. I don't need this pedigree. I don't care about any of this shit. I'm like, forget your fancy major and your Ivy League degree. I want to see people who are scrappy and hardworking. And then they get resumes that get thrown in the trash before they ever make it to their desk because the kid didn't go to the right school, didn't study the right thing, didn't have the right pedigree. So which is it, right? Do you want grit, and how do you sort for that? So that's ultimately the problem that we want to try to help solve, is how to funnel the community of curious, eager, smart kids out there who simply don't have paths open to them because they didn't check the right box when they were 12 years old.
Yeah.
How do we get those people in front of the thought leaders in the industry who are looking for that raw talent and who are dismayed, quite frankly, by the talent coming out of many of these elite institutions where that is just a box-checking exercise and it doesn't pan out?
Well, that Angela Duckworth book, and hopefully you both read it. Name of the book, Dan? Grit.
Grit, yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my question, Chris, because if you think about it, in our world, there's a finite number of topics you can sort of cover.
Yeah.
So you have to you use the word iterative, you have to develop. That seems logical. Like how, okay, now we've educated people.
Yep. Yeah.
How are we going to get these folks in front of the right people? So you brainstorm that. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
That's
Sorry,
that's what we ultimately are hoping to be able to do, is obviously because the biggest problem is that if a kid has not gotten an internship as a sophomore, they're shit out of luck. And it's like you could be the smartest kid who's a senior in college and you just didn't realize that these opportunities were available. And it's like, sorry, you're day old bread. Like nobody wants to talk to you. And it's, in my opinion, kind of ridiculous. And the number of messages we get from people who are so hungry to learn and again have these like incredible backgrounds that, I mean, I feel like I wish there was a way for them to just get the chance to get a job. Where again, back in the day, you know, people, it's like, you hear stories of people like wandering from like up in the mailroom and they just get a job on the trading floor and become the CEO. And I mean, we ultimately just want to help people get these opportunities, because it doesn't make sense that you can only have done it if you're a sophomore and you're like 12 years old. And like, no, like there's really smart people that just need to be able to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and that's a great lesson. I mean, we just spent some time with Phil Snow, as the CEO of FactSet, and this is a company that if you've been on Wall Street, you've used their product for forever, right? Well, he started out on their customer service desk 23 years ago, and we were down at their Focus conference a few weeks ago in Miami, and their head of product also did 20 years ago. They had like 5 of their senior leadership that have been there, you know, started out like essentially in the mailroom. And, you know, the list goes on and on of those stories. It's really hard to find those on Wall Street now. So what do you guys, what's the best advice that you have? Like, how early do kids have to make up their mind that this is a career path they want to take? Because again, you do have to come from some of the right places. They're not giving shots to little state schools and stuff like that. And there's a lot of great, really brilliant kids that are just not having those opportunities.
Well, I think if you keep waiting for someone to hand you an opportunity, you're never going to get it. And I think that if doors are closed to you, whether it be in the formal internship programs or whatever, make your own internship program. We talked to, again, from the University of Chicago, not like some, you know, middle of nowhere.
Well, and Hofstra.
We've talked to so many people who have gone into different institutions and said, there's no internship program here, but can I XYZ? Can I come sit behind you for a week? Whatever it is. I mean, guy, that you talked about that was your first experience, right? Just sitting around waiting for someone to notice you, right? That still is possible. And I would also say this too. I think that young people coming up today have been taught that everything is so transactional that you are supposed to be offered something in exchange for your service, and it's of a certain value to you today. And like whatever that value is, you will do no more, no less. And it has to be within those parameters, right? I would say, listen, if you want any chance at succeeding, not only in this business, but in others too, to operate from a standpoint of service and to come and say, what can I do for you? And see how it plays out. Worst thing that happens to you is you waste whatever it is, 10 weeks of your life trying to be of service to someone who wants nothing to do with you. But I think where people go astray is they think this corporation, I mean nothing to them. Why should I stay here for more than 5 minutes if a $5 raise comes along somewhere else? I think people are so quick to bail for the next best thing because they view all those relationships as transactional without realizing that, sure, the company doesn't care about you, but the people at the company do. And build those relationships, and that's what's going to get you either a foot in the door or the next job or the next or the next.
So here's my sense again, Dan, if I may. Jen, you're probably a shitty poker player because you don't have a poker. Like
100%.
if you got pocket aces,
I cannot lie.
I can tell.
Yeah, no, it's
which,
not a
by
good
the way, I dig that. You, Chris, though, on the other hand, you play things close to the vest. With all that said, there's an excitement about what you're both doing that you probably didn't. My instinct suggests you were probably apprehensive, but you're really jazzed now. So speak
I'm
to that.
I mean, look, we say this all the time. I wake up every morning and I can't wait to like start working, and I go to bed and I'm annoyed that I have to sleep. It's like we are so excited, and even before like this on anywhere, it's like we had like 200 downloads of the podcast. We were like, yeah, we're big time.
Oh, that was so big
and
time.
we literally had said to each other, we're like, if this goes nowhere, it doesn't matter because we've had the most fun like we've ever had. I get to literally talk all day, every day with my best friend. We're creating something. And I think like just feeling creative is just, I don't know, there's something really nice about it. And so we feel like we're putting these like babies out into the universe, and we get to like watch as it grows and becomes a little person, not really, it becomes a little business.
Right.
So, but no, we're having so much fun, and I forget what the question was, but we're having a really great time.
So we get a lot of feedback on our pods. A lot of our listeners, obviously, some listen because they want to do the opposite of what we're suggesting. Some listen because
Or are you guys like a Jim Cramer effect?
we could be the inverse, but
anti-Adami?
But they really like our war stories. And on your pod, that Guy was on, and we'll put it in the show notes, you told a few, Guy, and they were pretty good. I've heard a couple of them, but a couple I hadn't heard. You guys give us a good war story from each of you on the street. Let's hear it.
I'm going to give you the war story from, oh God, like which one do you want? Okay, so full disclosure, I used to cover a very big macro hedge fund, and I took the trader who I covered out for drinks one night, and he had not told me this, but he had gotten his wisdom teeth removed that day. And I was like, are you sure you should like be drinking champagne? He's like, yeah, it's totally fine. No big deal, right? Comes into work the next morning, and he is a disaster. And he calls me, he's like, oh my God, you won't believe what happened to me after I left here after that one glass of champagne, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know where I am today. And it was a bond auction day. And can we talk about curve steepeners and flatteners?
Sure.
Listeners familiar with that? Okay, so it was a bond auction day. He was like, hey, listen, we'd been talking about it the day before. He was like, I really think I'm going to put on a steepener into the auction, blah, 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 right? And then, just see if the auction tails cover it, whatever. I was like, okay, fine. So after we get off this call where he has like, unburdened his soul to me about all of his activities from the evening prior and how he is in no way, shape, or form fit to trade that day. He calls me back and he goes, hey, bid whatever it is, like 250 tens versus weighted bonds, right? And I was like, okay. And I didn't think to ask the question, right? And I was like, I guess he must have put on a steepener with someone else and he's unwinding with me. So we execute the trade. He puts on a flattener. And I go about my day, and market sells off pretty hard into this auction, right? And like 4 or 5 hours go by. And he calls me back and he's like, hey, your back office guys are trying to like, reconcile this trade with me or whatever. Like, you went the wrong way on the trade.
No way.
And I was like, oh my God. And again, like, I'm
is
usually
horrible
like,
feeling.
I literally feel sick just talking about it right now. My heart is racing. And I was like, no, I don't think. He goes, I'm going to pull the tapes, right?
Really?
And I was like, and pulling the tapes was a big
I
deal.
remember it like it's yesterday.
And again, I didn't know where these mythical tapes were, but this was in the digital age, right? Like, can't you just be like, okay, select, no.
Yeah,
these were tapes.
Yeah.
So they had to go and pull the tapes, and it pulled all of his conversations from the day. And he sat down with the portfolio manager at the time, very large hedge fund, which was one of the biggest clients of the firm at the time. And they have to sit through the whole thing, and they go in this room to listen to the tape. And and meanwhile, I'm like
shitting in your pants.
I mean, like more gracefully, like I was sweating.
Yeah.
and I'm talking to my boss, and my boss was just like, well, like you make mistakes, you live with them. We're just gonna see. And I was like, no, but I really don't think, like, I've never gone the wrong way on a trade before. Like, I really don't. Why would this be the one? Whatever. And sure enough, they listened to all 3 hours of tape where he's like, I'm not fit to be in the office today, and he had in fact gone the wrong way on the trade. And it cost him whatever. He took like a decent sized hickey on it. Cost him like $450,000, $500,000.
But it's what's the terrifying part is you replay that conversation in your head to this day.
To this day. This was 14 years ago.
And I know, and it is, that's part of it can be haunting. And situations like that are, listen, the great things you forget, it's things like that stay with you, which is both the good part of our business and the bad part of our business. Like the great things you forget, but the things that terrified you, I mean, they haunt me to this day.
Kristen, what do you got? You got one for us?
Mine, it's not even just a specific thing. It's just I had a habit of like always picking the next group that was going to blow up. So it's like I started in 2007. I went into CDOs. I mean, rounds and rounds of layoffs. And I was like, I need to get out of here. So I go into converts. And at the time, it was 2008, I guess. And so all these banks are trying to get more equity capital. So they're issuing, nobody's going to invest in their equity. So they're issuing converts. And so you have all these banks issuing converts. And then you have the world blow up. I think at the time people were talking about how like you would buy the CDS on the bank and then short the stock, which is like, buying insurance on your neighbor's house and then driving your car through it. So then I'm sitting in converts and then the convert market just like implodes. And so it's like each place I went, it was like one shit show after the next. But it was, I don't know, I felt like the whole thing was like kind of a crazy learning opportunity. I said this to Jen too, which is like, I kind of feel like you learn the most about things when the system is about to break. Because you see whether it is, right, whether it's in politics, it's like I kind of learned more about how our U.S. government works because you see how people are about to break it, right? It's the same thing with almost like with the whole financial system.
But you know what's interesting about that is that like Guy and I have a little PTSD from, and you guys might
Not
too,
a little,
from the financial crisis.
Yeah.
But like for instance, like it's never going to happen again. You know what I mean? Not. I'm just saying like.
Pardonnez-moi.
No. But what I'm saying is like because what they've taught us over the last 15 or so years is that they're going to do everything in their power not to let. They're not going to let things get to the brink the way they did in September of 2008. By the way, I have a good friend who was at Lehman, Credit Suisse, SVB. I'm not going to tell you where he is right now.
Oh my God!
Because like,
please
I mean,
do,
like,
yeah.
I mean, just to follow up really fast, I also have a terrible history with basically everything. Like my wedding, I mean, the hurricane hit the day that I was supposed to get married, so like I didn't get to get married that day.
But you have a
had my
wonderful
second
marriage.
kid, like right as so it's just. I have a habit and like I buy a house and I get a mortgage like right as right. So Jen's basically like anytime you make a life decision /
let me know.
You invest any way at all, like let me know so I can go the other way.
Remind me not to go on a cruise with you.
Well, no, it's not like lifestyle. It's more
I'm
financial.
kidding around. All right, so Kristen, you mentioned 3 daughters, 2, 4, 6.
Yeah.
Jen, you have kids as well.
6 and 8.
Which are very young. So you guys, you basically embarked on this when your kids there are a lot of responsibilities at home as well. Kristen, how do you, and Jen, I'm going to ask you, how do you sort of deal with that?
I mean, having really supportive partners. I am very fortunate to live near my parents. I mean, we moved out of the city closer to my parents. We have a nanny. And again, I feel like without support, it would not be possible. But again, I have the most amazing family and again, my nanny. So, but it's a balance. I mean, it's a balancing act at the end of the day.
And your nanny cooks for you, which is amazing.
She does. And she does our laundry, which she does not. I mean, that's not like normal. So,
Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I do balance anything well. I don't think I've ever been great at balance. I think I'm terribly disorganized and something's always falling through the cracks. And that's just very on brand for me. But yes, having a supportive partner who I tell my kids the reason mommy works 2 jobs is so that daddy can one day retire and spend more time with you. And then they ask daily if that day has come because they are annoyed by my presence. But no, I think that I will say this. Being excited and intellectually challenged all day and fired up about our business makes me a better partner. Right? Like, it's one thing for my husband to come home and be like, I had a rough day at work. And be like, here's the kid that was with him all day, right? Like, that was not going to work for me. Another thing to be like, well, hey, you had that day? Well, like, let me one up you on this or whatever. Or like, hey, I can relate to that because we had this challenge. And, speaking the same language with your partner, I think is very important. Even if you don't share the same career path, having empathy for them and being able to understand where they're coming from is something I think we do well. But yeah, like you said, I also moved my entire family to Charlotte. And I live in Charlotte, by the way. Which is amazing. And you should go there because the lifestyle is incredible and it makes it easier to do everything when you live in a nice place.
You must be like the Tasmanian devil in Charlotte because people must look at you like, who is this
No, because
person?
everyone there's a New York transplant too. So it's like, like everyone's kind of simpatico. You kind of get it.
Well, listen, I enjoyed being on your podcast. It was an absolute honor. I had a lot of fun. You learn a little, you remember things that you haven't thought about. And we had a great conversation.
Dan, when are you coming on?
Dan is going to come on.
I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I mean, we expect big things out of you two ladies. So we're fortunate to get you now before you get too big where you would blow us off. But Jen and Kristen,
we'll send you the bill.
Thanks for joining us. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having us on. We love what you guys are doing.
Thanks, guys.